There are farmers who switch brands out of anger, and then there are farmers who switch because the numbers stop lying. Jake Bergman was the second type, and it started with one tractor he never planned to keep. Bergman Farms sat on 3,400 acres of irrigated cropland in Cuming County, Nebraska. Corn and soybeans in rotation, center pivots watering half the ground, dry land on the rest, good soil, consistent yields. A family operation that had been in Jake's name since 2011 when his father retired and moved to Arizona. Jake ran the place alone. No hired help, just him, his equipment, and 14-hour days from April to November. His fleet was all John Deere. Two 883-45R tractors, 345 horsepower each, IVT transmission, the kind of machines that dominated Nebraska farmland because everyone ran them and no one questioned it. A 7290R for lighter work, a 6155M utility tractor for feeding cattle, and two S-Series combines. All green, all financed through John Deere Financial, all serviced at Dinkle Implement in West Point, a dealership Jake's father had used since 1987. Jake didn't have a problem with Deere. The equipment worked. It wasn't flashy, but it got the job done. His 80th 45Rs pulled a 12-row planter through 1,700 acres of corn every spring without complaint. His combines cut 3,400 acres of beans and corn every fall. Breakdowns were rare. When they happened, Dinkle usually had parts within a week, sometimes two. It was predictable. Predictable was expensive, but it was safe. February 2023. Jake sat at his kitchen table with a fuel expense report his accountant had sent over. Total diesel consumption for 2022, 24,600 gallons. Total cost at an average of $4.20 per gallon, $103,320. Jake stared at the number, over $100,000 in fuel. He'd known it was high, but seeing it in print made it real. He opened his laptop and started looking at fuel consumption specs for his tractors. The John Deere 8345R burned an average of 6.8 gallons per hour under load. Jake did the math. His two 8345Rs ran a combined 840 hours per year. That was 12,512 gallons just between those two machines. At $4.20 per gallon, $52,550. He leaned back. That was half his fuel budget on two tractors. Jake started searching for comparisons. He found a forum thread from a farmer in Germany comparing a John Deere 8345R to a Fendt 939 Vario. Similar horsepower, similar tasks. The Fendt's fuel consumption, 5.6 gallons per hour. Jake read it twice. That was 17.6% less fuel. He clicked on another thread. A farmer in Iowa had run a Fendt 828 Vario against a Deere 8R for an entire season and reported a 19% reduction in fuel use. Jake bookmarked both. He'd heard of Fendt, German brand, owned by AGCO, known for continuously variable transmissions and fuel efficiency. But Jake had never seen one in person. There wasn't a Fendt dealer in Cuming County. The closest was Titan Machinery in Norfolk, 35 miles northeast. He'd driven past it 100 times, never stopped. March 8th, 2023. Jake called Titan Machinery. A guy named Ron Decker answered. Sales manager, direct tone, no small talk. Jake told him what he was running and what he was looking for. I want to see what Fendt's fuel economy actually looks like. Not marketing claims, real-world numbers. Ron didn't hesitate. Come in, I'll show you the logs from our demo units. Jake drove to Norfolk that afternoon. The lot was mixed. AGCO brands, Massey Ferguson, Fendt, a few challengers. Ron met him at the door and walked him straight to a Fendt 939 Vario sitting near the service bay. 395 horsepower, Vario transmission, continuous variable, no gears, just infinite ratio adjustment. Ron pulled up a tablet and showed Jake fuel logs from a customer in Iowa who'd run the 939 for 680 hours on primary tillage. Average fuel consumption 5.4 gallons per hour. Jake looked at the number. My 8345R burns 6.8 under the same load. Ron nodded. That's a 20% difference. Over 1,800 hours a year, that's 2,520 gallons saved. At $4.20 a gallon, that's $10,584 per tractor. Jake felt something shift. That's more than $10,000 a year. Per tractor, Ron said. You're running two 8345Rs, right? Yeah. So, double it. Jake stared at the 939 Vario. It looked different. Cleaner lines, no aggressive styling, just function. He walked around it, checked the cab, the hydraulics, the three-point hitch. Everything felt tighter, more precise. What's the catch? Jake asked. Ron shrugged. It's German. Parts cost more. Resale value in Nebraska isn't as strong as Deere because there's fewer of them. But the fuel economy is real, and the Vario transmission is bulletproof. Jake asked the question that mattered. What happens if it breaks down? Ron's answer changed everything. AGCO has a Power Guard warranty. If we can't fix your tractor within 48 hours, we provide a loaner at no cost until yours is running. Jake blinked. A loaner? Ron nodded. Same class machine. You keep working. We eat the cost. How long does that last? Depends on the package. Standard is 2 years. You can extend it to 5. Jake had never heard of a warranty like that. When his Deere 8345R had gone down the previous year with a hydraulic pump failure, he'd waited 9 days for parts. No loaner, no alternative, just daily calls to Dinkle asking when the part would ship. He'd lost 47 hours of field time. In corn planting season, that was catastrophic. He'd made up for it by running 16-hour days and pulling an all-nighter to finish before rain hit. It worked, but it nearly broke him. What's this tractor cost? Jake asked. Ron pulled up the configurator. With the specs you'd want, $287,000. Trade value on your 8345R is around $195,000. Net cost, $92,000. Jake exhaled. That's more than I want to spend on a test. Ron looked at him. You're not testing. You're replacing. And if the fuel savings are real, you'll recover that $92,000 in 4 years. After that, it's pure profit. Jake didn't sign. Not yet, but he didn't leave either. He asked Ron if he could run the tractor, take it to my place for a week, see how it handles my ground. Ron handed him the keys. It's a demo unit, 140 hours on it. Take it, run it hard. If it doesn't outperform your Deere, bring it back. Jake hooked his 16-shank chisel plow to the Fendt 939 Vario that afternoon. He drove it 35 miles back to his farm and put it in a 480-acre cornfield that hadn't been worked yet. Heavy residue, compacted soil, the kind of work that made tractors grunt. He opened the throttle and engaged the PTO. The Fendt didn't hesitate. It pulled the chisel plow at 6.2 miles per hour without lugging. The Vario transmission adjusted seamlessly. No gear hunting, no power loss, just smooth, relentless forward motion. Jake ran it for 8 hours straight. He monitored the fuel gauge obsessively. When he shut it down at 9 p.m., the digital display showed fuel consumption, 5.7 gallons per hour. Jake pulled out his phone and checked his logs from the previous spring when he'd run the same implement with his A345R, 7.1 gallons per hour. The difference was real. He called Ron Decker. I want it. You sure? I ran it for 8 hours. It's 20% more efficient than my Deere and pulls smoother. The Vario transmission is better than anything I've used. Ron's voice was calm. All right, let's write it up. Jake signed the contract on March 14th, 2023. One Fendt 939 Vario, $287,000. Trade-in on his 2018 John Deere 8345R, $195,000. Net financed, $92,000 over 5 years at 6.4%. Monthly payment, $1,788. Jake kept his second 8345R. He wasn't ready to go all in. This was a test, 1 tractor, 2 years. If it failed, he'd sell the Fendt and go back to Deere. If it worked, he'd reconsider everything. April 2023, spring planting. Jake ran the Fendt 939 Vario on primary tillage and planting prep, 340 hours in 28 days. He kept detailed logs, fuel consumption per hour, hydraulic response time, cab comfort, ease of operation, every metric. The Fendt averaged 5.6 gallons per hour across all tasks. His remaining 8345R, running the same ground with a different implement, averaged 6.9 gallons per hour. The gap was consistent. Jake's neighbor, Carl Hoffman, ran a 4,200-acre operation 2 miles west. Carl was all Deere. 3 8R tractors, 2 9R tractors, a fleet that represented 40 years of brand loyalty. Carl stopped by Jake's shop one evening in late April. Saw you running a Fendt. Yeah, Jake said. Trying it out. Carl walked around the 939 Vario. German, right? Yeah, AGCO owns them. Carl nodded. Heard they're expensive to fix. Don't know yet, Jake said. Haven't broken it. Carl smirked. Give it time. But the Fendt didn't break. May came. Jake ran the 939 on planting duty, pulling his 12-row Kinsey planter through 1,700 acres of corn. The Vario transmission let him adjust speed without touching a shifter. Just a lever. Infinite control. When he hit a wet spot and needed to slow down, he moved the lever. The tractor responded instantly. No lag, no gear drop, just seamless deceleration. When the ground firmed up, he pushed the lever forward and the tractor accelerated smoothly back to 5.8 miles per hour. His 8345R couldn't do that. The IVT transmission worked, but it hunted between ranges. There was always a delay, a moment where the tractor had to think before responding. The Fendt didn't think, it just obeyed. June 2023. Jake was refueling at the co-op in West Point when he ran into Tom Dinkle, the owner of Dinkle Implement. Tom had sold John Deere equipment in Cumming County since 1991. Jake's father had bought his first 4Z20 from Tom's father in 1973. The relationship went back 50 years. Tom walked over. "Heard you bought a Fendt." Jake nodded. "Yeah, just one. Testing it out." Tom's face was unreadable. "How's it running?" "Good. Fuel economy's about 18% better than my 8345R. Tom crossed his arms. "You know those German tractors don't hold value here, right? If you ever need to sell it, you're going to take a hit." Jake met his eyes. "I'm not planning to sell it. I'm planning to run it." Tom's jaw tightened. "Well, when you need parts, don't be surprised if they cost twice what Deere charges." Jake didn't respond. He finished fueling and drove off. But the message was clear. Tom Dinkle wasn't happy. July 2023. Wheat harvest. Jake didn't grow much wheat, just 180 acres, but it was a break between corn and bean season. He used the downtime to run maintenance on his equipment. The Fendt 939 Vario had 512 hours on it. Jake pulled the service records: 1 oil change, 1 fuel filter, 1 air filter. Total maintenance cost $340. He pulled the records for his 8345R at the same hour interval from the previous year. $920. The Fendt's simpler engine design required less, fewer emissions components, less complexity. Jake opened his accounting software and started building a comparison spreadsheet. Fuel cost, maintenance cost, downtime, operator comfort. He ran projections for 2 years. If the Fendt maintained its current fuel economy, he'd save $10,800 per year in diesel alone. Over 2 years, $21,600. Maintenance savings added another $1,400 per year. Over 2 years, $2,800. Total 2-year savings, $24,400. That covered 26% of the net cost of the tractor, and he still had 3 years of payments left. By year 5, the Fendt would have paid for itself in operational savings alone. Jake saved the spreadsheet. He didn't show it to anyone, not yet, but he knew what it meant. August 2023. Jake prepped for soybean and corn harvest. His 2 S-Series John Deere combines were ready, a 2019 S780 and a 2021 S790. Both had been serviced at Dinkle in July. Both were running fine. But Jake's mind was on his tractors. The Fendt, 680 hours now, still no breakdowns, still no service calls, just routine maintenance and relentless performance. Carl Hoffman stopped by again, saw the Fendt in the field. "Still running?" Jake nodded. 680 hours, 0 issues. Carl raised an eyebrow. "You keeping the other 8345R? For now. You planning to buy another Fendt?" Jake paused. "Maybe. Depends on how this one holds up." Carl shook his head. "You're making a mistake. Deere's the standard for a reason." Jake looked at him. "What reason is that?" "Because everyone runs them," Carl said. "That's not a reason," Jake said. "That's just inertia." Carl left without another word. September 4th, 2023. The moment that changed everything. Jake was combining soybeans, running his S780 through a 240-acre field, cutting at 4.8 miles per hour. The combine was running clean, good sample, low loss. Then at 2:30 in the afternoon, the header drive gearbox seized. Full mechanical failure. The header stopped mid-cut. Alarms filled the cab. Jake killed the engine and climbed out. He opened the side panel. Gear oil everywhere. Metal shavings. The gearbox had grenaded itself. Not from where, from a manufacturing defect that had been waiting for the worst possible moment. Jake had 2,900 acres of beans left to cut. Weather was perfect. A narrow window before rain moved in on September 8th. He had 4 days to finish, and his primary combine was dead. Jake called Dinkle Implement. Got the service department, told them what happened. "We'll get a tech out there tomorrow morning," the dispatcher said. "I need it today," Jake said. "I've got 4 days before rain." "We're slammed, Jake. Everyone's harvesting. Best I can do is tomorrow at 8 a.m. The tech arrived at 8:40 a.m. the next morning. He took one look at the gearbox and whistled. Yeah, that's toast. You need a full replacement. How long for parts? 3 to 5 days if we're lucky. Could be a week. Jake felt his chest tighten. A week? It's a specialized unit. Deere's backlogged. What am I supposed to do? You've got the S790, right? Run that. I can't cut 2,900 acres in 3 days with one combine. The tech shrugged. I'll put a rush on the part. That's all I can do. Jake called Tom Dinkle directly. Tom, I need this expedited. I don't care what it costs. I'll pay overnight shipping. Jake, we don't control Deere's supply chain. If they say 5 days, that's what it is. You've been a platinum dealer for 20 years. Call someone. I already did. They told me the same thing. Jake hung up. He stood in his shop, staring at the S780 with its dead gearbox. Then he remembered something. Ron Decker's voice. If we can't fix your tractor within 48 hours, we provide a loaner at no cost until yours is running. Jake pulled out his phone and called Titan Machinery. Ron answered. Yeah, this is Jake Bergman. I bought the 939 Vario from you in March. Hey, Jake. What's up? My Deere combine just went down. Gearbox failure. Parts are 5 days out minimum. I'm in the middle of harvest. I've got 4 days before rain. I'm dead in the water. There was a pause. You need a combine? I know you sell tractors, but I figured I'd call. We've got a Fendt Ideal 10 demo unit on the lot. 530 horsepower. It's yours if you need it. Jake blinked. You serious? Dead serious. PowerGuard warranty covers breakdowns. Your combine isn't a Fendt, but you're a customer. I'll make an exception. Get up here. I'll have it ready. Jake drove to Norfolk. The Fendt Ideal 10 was sitting in the lot, gleaming white and red, a machine that looked like it had been designed by engineers who didn't care about tradition, only performance. Ron walked him through it. 530 horsepower, single-rotor threshing system, simpler than Deere's twin rotors, fewer parts to fail, 570-bushel grain tank. This thing will outcut your S780. Jake climbed into the cab. The controls were different, but intuitive. He turned the key. The engine fired instantly. Smooth. Quiet. Ron handed him the manual. Take it. Run it through your beans. Bring it back when your Deere's fixed. What's this cost me? Nothing, Ron said. You're a customer. This is what we do. Jake drove the Fendt Ideal 10 back to his farm that afternoon. He put it in the same field where his S780 had died. He opened the header and started cutting. The Ideal 10 didn't just match the Deere, it humiliated it. Faster ground speed, cleaner sample, less fuel per acre. The single rotor system handled green stem beans without slugging. The grain tank filled faster. The cab visibility was better. Jake ran it for 11 hours straight. When he shut it down at midnight, he'd cut 340 acres, more than he'd ever done in a single day with the S780. And the fuel gauge showed 7.8 gallons per hour. His S780 burned 9.2 under the same load, 15% less fuel. Jake sat in the cab, hands on the steering wheel, staring out at the field. He thought about the 5-day parts delay, the lack of urgency, the dealership that had taken him for granted. And then he thought about the phone call he'd made at 10 a.m. and the combine sitting in his driveway by 3 p.m. No questions, no hesitation, just a loaner machine and a handshake. September 7th. Jake finished his soybean harvest, all 2,900 acres. The Fendt Ideal 10 ran flawlessly, 0 breakdowns, 0 delays. When the parts for his S780 finally arrived on September 9th, Jake had already returned the Ideal to Ron Decker. But something had shifted. Jake called Ron. What would it take to buy that Ideal 10? Ron paused. You want to buy it? Yeah. And I want to trade my S780. Even with a bad gearbox, we'll fix it and resell it. What's the Ideal cost? $615,000. Trade value on your S780, even with the repair, $280,000. Net cost, $335,000. Jake exhaled. That's a big number. It is, Ron said, but you just ran it. You know what it does. Yeah, Jake said. I do. Let me think about it. Jake didn't think long. He ran the numbers. The Ideal 10 burned 15% less fuel than his S780. Over 600 hours of annual runtime, that was 84 gallons saved per year. At 40 per gallon, $352.80 annually. Not huge, but the real value wasn't fuel. It was uptime. The Ideal 10 had saved his harvest. The loaner program had kept him running when Deere left him stranded. That had value. Jake couldn't quantify it in dollars, but he felt it in his chest every time he thought about that 5-day parts delay. He called Ron back. "I'll take it." "You sure?" "Yeah." "Write it up." October 2023. Jake's operation looked different. One Fendt 939 Vario tractor, one Fendt Ideal 10 combine, one John Deere 8345R tractor, one John Deere S790 combine, a split fleet, half German, half American. The neighbors noticed. So did Tom Dinkle. Jake was picking up oil filters at Dinkle Implement when Tom walked out of his office. "Jake, we need to talk." Tom's voice was tight. "You bought a Fendt combine." "I did. After we've serviced your Deere equipment for 30 years. Tom, my combine was down for 5 days. You couldn't get me parts. I had 4 days to finish before rain. What was I supposed to do?" Tom crossed his arms. "So you bought a $600,000 combine out of spite?" "I bought it because AGCO had a loaner in my driveway 6 hours after I called. You had me waiting 5 days with no alternative." Tom's face hardened. "You know what your problem is, Jake? You don't value relationships. You just chase the next shiny thing." Jake stared at him. "I valued our relationship for 12 years. I spent $60,000 a year here on parts and service. And the one time I needed you to move fast, you told me to wait." Tom didn't respond. Jake walked out, November 2023. Corn harvest. Jake ran both combines, the Fendt Ideal 10 and the Deere S790. He kept logs. The Ideal cut 1,800 acres. The S790 cut 1,600, same number of days. The Ideal's fuel efficiency, larger grain tank, and faster unload time gave it the edge. Jake finished his entire corn harvest in 11 days. The previous year, running both Deere combines, it had taken 13. December 2023. Winter set in. Jake ran maintenance on his fleet. The Fendt 939 Vario had 1,420 hours. Total maintenance cost for the year, 80s. His 8345R at similar hours had cost 2,940. The Fendt Ideal 10 had 480 hours. Maintenance cost 680s. His S790 at the same interval had cost 350. Jake updated his spreadsheet. Total operational savings on the Fendt tractor and combine for 2023, $18,200. Fuel, maintenance, and downtime combined. He stared at the number. That was 5.4% of his net farm income, and he'd only run the Fendt equipment for 9 months. January 2024. Jake made a decision. He called Ron Decker. "I want to trade my 8345R for another Fendt 939 Vario, and I want to trade my S790 for another Ideal." Ron was silent for 3 seconds. "You're going full Fendt?" "Yeah." "Why?" "Because I can't afford not to." February 14th, 2024. Jake's new equipment arrived. A second Fendt 939 Vario, a second Fendt Ideal 10 combine. His entire fleet was now German. 2 Fendt tractors, 2 Fendt combines, 0 John Deere iron. The transformation had taken 11 months. Carl Hoffman stopped by, saw the new Fendts in the shed. "You really did it." Jake nodded. "Yeah." Carl shook his head. "You know everyone's talking about you, right? Let them talk." Carl looked at the machines. "You ever regret it?" Jake thought about the 5-day parts delay, the loaner combine that saved his harvest, the fuel savings that added up to $18,000 a year, the warranty that treated breakdowns like emergencies instead of inconveniences. "No," Jake said, "not once." March 2024. Jake ran into Tom Dinkle at the co-op. Tom didn't speak, just nodded. Jake nodded back. The relationship was over, but Jake didn't feel loss. He felt relief. April 2024. Spring planting. Jake ran both Fendt 939 Varios through 1,700 acres of corn in 12 days. Fuel consumption averaged 5.5 gallons per hour across both tractors. The previous year, running one Fendt and one Deere, his average had been 6.1 gallons per hour. The savings compounded. June 2024. Carl Hoffman called. "Can I come see your Fendts?" Jake said yes. Carl showed up that afternoon with a notebook. He asked questions: fuel economy, maintenance intervals, warranty details, dealer response time. Jake answered everything honestly. At the end, Carl said, "I'm thinking about buying one." "A Fendt?" "Just one." "To test it." Jake smiled. That's how it starts. September 2024, harvest season. Jake ran both Fendt Ideal 10 combines through 3,400 acres in 9 days. 0 breakdowns, 0 delays. Fuel consumption averaged 7.6 gallons per hour. His old Deere S-Series combines had averaged 9.1. The difference was $12,750 in annual fuel savings alone. Jake sat in his shop looking at his fleet. 2 Fendt 939 Vario tractors, 2 Fendt Ideal 10 combines, all red and white, all German, all proof that loyalty only works when it runs both ways. Jake Bergman didn't switch to Fendt to make a statement. He switched because a 5-day parts delay taught him that uptime matters more than tradition, and a loaner combine taught him that a warranty isn't a contract, it's a promise. Jake runs Fendt now, not because it's German, because when he calls they answer, and when he breaks down, they show up. That's the only loyalty that pays.